and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. Today, as you can see, we're doing a rerun. I've always found these episodes so helpful for every season, and since we are in the thick of summer, I thought that this would be the perfect time to go over some tips to help your houseplants in the summertime. Before we do, I'm going to quickly announce our giveaway winners. This is something I like to do every episode. I pick 2 giveaway winners. Someone who has left a review on Apple Podcasts wins, and then I also take another winner from someone who has answered the most recent episode's question on Spotify. So from both Apple or Spotify, whether you're listening on either one, you have a chance to enter in and win. And what you're winning is a package from Market Botany. They've been so generous to help sponsor our giveaway, so they will send you a bottle of their Leaf Shine and a bottle of their prop drops. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what prop drops are, they're just like a liquid aid for helping your water propagations, and they help your water propagations root faster and do a lot better in general. I've been using it and I've been loving it. So let's announce these giveaway winners and get into this episode. So our first winner coming from Spotify. Last episode, we talked about mushrooms with Barbara Batakova, and I asked you guys, have you ever been hunting for mushrooms before? Our winner today is Jasmine.Dickman, and she said, yes, it was unintentional, but I ended up mushroom hunting at a park near where I lived, and I found so many within the grass. There were lots of deer as well. And Jasmine, if that was you, go ahead and email me at tenneyplants@gmail.com, tenneyplants@gmail.com, and I will get you set up with your package from Market Botany. And then our winner over on Apple Podcasts, their username is Winter Songbird, and they said, I discovered this podcast after I recently got into houseplants. In the past, I've been a plant killer. My husband is a fantastic gardener, but is currently fighting cancer. Visiting greenhouses and bringing greenery indoors has been something we can do together as he heals, and this show is so relaxing and informative. It's been a perfect support system for my new hobby during a difficult time, so thanks. Thank you so much for that sweet review. I will be praying for you and your husband. I know that battling cancer can be incredibly difficult, and so I am thinking of you. And Winter Songbird, if that was you who left that review, please email me at tenneyplants@gmail.com so I can get that giveaway package sent your way. And for everyone else listening, you are welcome to check out marketbotany.com. If you just head over there, there's actually a code you can use to get 10% off your orders. It's Plant School Podcast, no caps, no spaces. Again, that discount code is Plant School Podcast. And if you want to win next episode's giveaway or future episodes, be sure to answer those fun little questions on Spotify. If you click on an episode, it will show up beneath the episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, scroll down and leave a review, and that will enter you in to win a future giveaway. And now I will stop talking. Present Rachel will stop talking so that past Rachel can give you some tips on keeping your houseplants happy in summertime. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. As you can see, today we're going to be going over tips for keeping your houseplants happy in the summertime. We're going to dive right in. I thought this would be a great topic to cover since it is the thick of summertime. I guess for the northern hemisphere of the world it is, but that is a majority of my listeners. So for most of us, it is the thick of summer, and I thought this would be great to talk about how to keep your houseplants happy in the summer, because this can be a really great time for growth for our plant friends. So I have 9 tips in total for houseplants, and I'm going to dive into each one. The first tip being recheck how much sun your houseplant is getting. And I've done episodes for spring care and winter care, and I feel like this first tip is always in each of them, to recheck how much sun your houseplant is getting. Because as we know, the earth goes around the sun's position in the sky is changing over time. That changes how it's streaming into our windows. And the summer sun can be really high up. It can be harsh and hot. Sometimes, at least in those south-facing windows, the sun isn't streaming in quite as good as it was in the winter time. So just give a second to notice how they're doing. If they're getting crispy leaf edges, brown spots, or leaves are really too close to the window and they're turning brown or going yellow, or your plant is going limp, maybe move them away from the window a little bit to remove them away from getting too much direct sun or too much heat. There are plants that are prone to heat damage more so than others. Some examples of those that are prone include the mini monstera, prayer plants, polka dot begonias. So if you do have those, be sure to move them away from the window, or you can put like a sheer curtain in between them. That way it kind of gives them a barrier without removing all of the sun that they're getting. My second tip is to check the soil more frequently. So with higher temperatures in the summertime, with more sun, sometimes less humidity in the summertime, for others, more humidity. But the higher temps and more sun can all contribute to a plant's soil drying out more quickly. So they may need to be watered more frequently. And instead of just simply starting to water them more, I want you to check the soil more often, because a watering schedule can often fail us. Instead, checking the soil to feel if it's actually dry is the way to go, so that you aren't underwatering, you aren't overwatering. And I would suggest maybe doing that about every 3 to 5 days in the summertime, because that soil just tends to dry out quicker. And I found this interesting, but as I was researching and looking around for all the information for keeping houseplants happy in the summer, quite a few people recommended to use room temperature water, not cold water, because some people think that the cool or cold water will help their houseplant in the summer, but it does not. It actually just shocks them. You think about where they live in nature. In those summer months, they aren't all of a sudden getting very cold rainstorms. It's very much warm rainstorms, room temperature water coming down from the sky. So don't feel like you need to cool them off. That's not exactly how it works for houseplants. I'm sure you already knew that, but I thought it was just interesting that quite a few people had to talk about that online, and so I thought I would throw it in here too. My third tip is to keep your houseplants away from your AC vents that are blasting cold air. Like I was just talking about, since a large majority of houseplants are mostly tropical and are used to environments that stay relatively the same temperature year-round, they can really react or get stressed when they receive cold drafts. It can cause yellowing of the leaves or fading leaves. So if you can, keep them away from being directly on an AC vent or near them as much as you can. If you start to notice some adverse effects because it is by an AC vent, go ahead and remove it and put it in a new location. My fourth tip has to do with fertilizing. So since summertime has extended periods of sun, indoor plants are often undergoing spurts of growth. They do this in the spring as well. So if you have already started fertilizing in the spring months, great, keep it going. And if you haven't, summer is a great time to be fertilizing so that those nutrients in the fertilizer can supply the necessary nutrients for growth. But as a side note, before you just dive into fertilizing all of your houseplants, some plants, if it is too hot, they go into a sort of survival mode. And their energy just goes into coping/surviving instead of absorbing nutrients. So if you are in the midst of a heat wave, or you can tell that your houseplants are really stressed because maybe your house is warmer than it usually is, and they're kind of taking the brunt of it, do not fertilize them. Fertilizing is never a good idea when the plant you have is dealing with other stressors, such as a heavy pruning, a heat wave, you just repotted it. Things like that. You want to be fertilizing when your houseplant is actively growing, it is healthy, and it's not stressed. So I would recommend fertilizing every month or every other month while it is growing during these summer months with a balanced fertilizer or a slow release fertilizer, something like a 10-10-10 or a 10-15-10. Those numbers are simply the percentage of active ingredients in the fertilizer for NPK in that order: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So if you find one that's a 10-10-10, maybe even a 20-20-20, and you dilute it down, that can be a great way to go for a majority of your houseplants. I'm going to pause right here for a quick break, and we will come back and jump right into the next 5 tips for keeping your houseplants happy in the summer. Let's jump right back in with tip number 5, that being to repot any plants that need it. Spring and summer are kind of the ideal times to be repotting, since these are the active seasons of growth, and it allows your houseplants to bounce back easier than they would when they're more dormant in the winter and fall times. So some signs that you may see in your houseplants that they might need to be repotted include roots coming out of the bottom of the pot or out of the top of your pot, the soil is drying out very, very quickly, or you have circling roots. An easy way to tell if your houseplant needs to be repotted is simply to lift it up, look to see if roots are coming out, and sometimes you can grab the base of your houseplant and pull it up completely out of its pot and see how those roots are doing. I often do this after I get a houseplant from the grocery store because I feel like those are always outgrowing their pots that they come in. By the time they get to the store and ready to be bought, I feel like they are ready for a new pot. So it's just something to be aware of, because summer can be a great time to do these tasks. And again, as a note with repotting, if you are in the midst of a heat wave, wait until it's a little cooler, just simply to avoid too much stress. You don't want to be repotting in the midst of a heat wave. That can really stress out a plant, and we don't want to give it too many stressors that push it over and cause it to die. Tip number 6 is to keep your eye on humidity. For a lot of people, summer can be very dry. That is the case for me. I know that's not the case for everyone, but if you do live in a dry place, make sure that you have extra humidity in place. Humidifiers are probably the easiest way to do that. You can also clump plants together, or you can use an enclosed container. And speaking of humidity, I want to go on like a little sidetrack, because one of you, my listeners, his name is Evan. He reached out to me on Instagram, and he was telling me about pebble trays and how they actually don't work as well as I thought they did. Now, this is something I didn't know a lot about. I knew misting didn't work too great, but I was unaware of pebble trays. So I really appreciate him messaging me. He even sent me a bunch of videos giving evidence that they really don't work that well. And so after watching them and kind of diving into it, I'm going to stop recommending pebble trays as much, because they can raise humidity slightly, but not really near enough to be worth it. It's very similar to how misting doesn't effectively raise humidity for a long period of time. It doesn't make much of a difference for a plant. So instead, I would suggest getting a humidifier if it really is a problem for you. Honestly, I'm in a really dry place. I do have a humidifier that I use every now and then, but not super often. If I have a super picky plant, sometimes I'll just stick a bag over it to kind of give it that greenhouse effect, to give it more humidity. I know IKEA has some like enclosed plant containers. You can do things like that instead, but just be aware that pebble trays may not be as great as I thought they were. There's always something new to learn in the plant world, and thank you again, Evan, for reaching out and giving me the resources to learn more about it. On the other hand, if you live somewhere with very humid summers, great. Or maybe it's not so great. I've been places with humid summers and it's not my jam, but it is great for plants. So you may be able to put them outside so that they can enjoy it. You can open windows, which actually leads me to my next tip, which is to open windows or put them outside, because houseplants, they can be outside once night temperatures are above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 13 degrees Celsius. Be aware that they do need to slowly adapt. So start with like a few hours outside in the shade during hours of the day that aren't the hottest. Do that for about a week or two until they can fully be outside in a shaded area. And as an FYI, many of you probably know this, but a shaded spot outside is generally getting more sun than it would be inside in your home on your window. I think it's just a common misconception that outside in a shaded area is actually pretty bright for a houseplant that's used to being indoors. So if you are able to even get them out on your patio, on your front porch in a shaded area, that can be really great for them to get that extra sun. Houseplants are largely understory tropical plants, and they are used to shaded areas, so they can do really well there. Not a whole lot of houseplants like to be in full sun outside. Even your cacti and your succulents that are used to being inside your home can get sunburnt if you all of a sudden place them out in full sun. Desert houseplants need to be acclimated if they aren't used to that outdoor climate. Some other tips if you are considering putting them outside: make sure they can't tip in the wind. If it's a tall, large houseplant, just make sure that the pot is heavy enough to keep them from toppling over. And outside, they do dry out more quickly, so make sure that you are watering them appropriately. Also make sure that they have good drainage just in case of rainfall so that it doesn't cause root rot if they do happen to get extra water. Tip number 8 is to inspect for pests. And this is something I guess you should probably do every now and then no matter the season, but higher temperatures can cause weak growth. It can cause your plant to be stressed, and that makes it more prone to pest infestations. So as you are dusting your plants, removing any like pollen that's in the air, because I know there can be a lot of pollen moving around, this can be a great opportunity to really check on your plants, look under the leaves, and keep an eye out for pests. If you have placed them outside, in general, they should still be okay. It usually becomes a problem if your plant is stressed or it's having weak growth. Pests really love to attack a plant that is already on the downhill. But a lot of people do recommend before bringing your houseplants back inside to kind of pull them out of their pot and check around, because sometimes things like cockroaches can get into the pot. Also check the leaves for things like aphids, which are a common outdoor pest. Things like that. It's just always a great idea to check before you bring them back inside. And honestly, most people won't be needing to bring their houseplants back indoors until about September, some people even October. And my last tip, tip number 9 for keeping your houseplants happy in summer, is to avoid pruning too much. I feel like I've been talking so much about stress on a houseplant, but I'm going to talk about it just one more time, because pruning is a stress on a plant. And if you combine that with having heat, pruning can make it really hard for a plant to bounce back well. That's honestly why you don't see people pruning outdoor ornamental plants much in the summer, because it is hot, and the heat combined with that can be really detrimental for a plant. So spring is generally the time to be doing that, not summer. On the other hand, cleaning them up and removing yellowing leaves, dying leaves, that's totally fine. Feel free to do that. That's not going to harm the plant. It's just heavy pruning that is highly advised against. And with that, those are some tips for keeping your houseplants happy in the summer. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was kind of a fun, short, easy one, but I hope you guys have a great week and will join me in 2 weeks for a brand new episode of Plant School. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode, and you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School Podcast.